Detective Sarah Chen's body cam captured the scene at 2:17 p.m. on November 3, 2023. A backyard in Port Orchard, Washington. Rain-soaked earth. Skeletal remains emerging from a shallow grave near a weathered shed. A human jaw. Vertebrae. Fragments of decomposed clothing. And deeper in the excavation, more bones. Different sizes. Different states of decomposition. Officers had been searching the property for 3 hours. They were looking for evidence connected to a missing woman named Patricia Hammond. What they found was far worse. The forensics team arrived within 20 minutes. They cordoned off the entire backyard, set up tarps against the rain, began the careful process of excavation and documentation. By nightfall, they'd identified remains from at least 3 separate individuals. By the end of the week, the count would reach 7. Her name was Patricia Hammond, 41 years old, a licensed practical nurse who worked night shifts at a rehabilitation center in Bremerton. She'd been missing for 6 weeks. Her sister had reported her disappearance on September 19th. Patricia always called on Sundays. She'd missed 3 calls. Her car was found abandoned at a grocery store parking lot, keys still in the ignition. Patricia was the reason officers obtained the search warrant, but she wasn't buried in that yard. Not yet. She was still alive when they started digging. The property belonged to a man named Dennis Rader, 58 years old, former construction worker. He'd lived at the Port Orchard address for 11 years. Neighbors described him as quiet, kept to himself. The yard was overgrown. The shed looked ready to collapse. No one had any reason to look closer, until the cadaver dogs hit on the property. 3 separate dogs, all alerting to the same area near the shed. The warrant was executed that morning. Rader wasn't home. He was at work at a hardware store in Silverdale. Officers expected to find 1 body, Patricia Hammond's. What they discovered was a dumping ground that had been active for over a decade. Patricia Hammond left her apartment in Bremerton at 9:30 p.m. on September 17, 2023. She was headed to the grocery store before her night shift started at midnight. It was a routine she'd followed for 2 years. Shop for a few items, grab dinner from the deli, drive to work. She wore her nursing scrubs, light blue, her work badge clipped to the collar. Her phone was fully charged. She texted her sister Diana at 9:45 p.m., said she'd call Sunday like always. The grocery store was 3 miles from her apartment. Security footage captured her entering at 9:52 p.m. She walked through the produce section, picked up a pre-made sandwich from the deli, paid at the self-checkout at 10:04 p.m. The receipt was later found in her purse. She never clocked in for her shift. At 10:47 p.m., a store employee found Patricia's car in the parking lot. Engine running, driver's door open, her purse on the passenger seat, groceries in a bag on the floor, keys in, the ignition. No sign of Patricia. Dennis Rader had been watching her for 3 weeks. He worked at the hardware store 6 days a week, unloading trucks, stocking shelves. On his days off, he drove. He had a white panel van with no windows in the back, rust on the wheel wells, magnetic signs on the sides that said, DR Plumbing Services. There was no such company. The signs came off easily. He'd noticed Patricia at the grocery store in late August, watched her routine, alone, predictable schedule, night shift worker. He'd followed her twice before. September 17th was the 3rd time. Security footage from the parking lot captured what happened. The timestamp, 10:11 p.m. Patricia exiting the store, walking toward her car, a white van pulling up beside her, too close, blocking her path. The camera angle didn't capture faces, just movements. Patricia stepping back, the van's side door sliding open. A brief struggle, 17 seconds, then Patricia was gone. The van drove away at 10:12 p.m. Rader took her to his house in Port Orchard. The drive was 23 minutes. He parked the van in his garage, closed the door. Patricia Hammond was alive for approximately 14 more hours. He kept her in the shed. It was soundproof. He'd installed insulation and plywood over the windows years earlier. He'd done this 6 times before. He had a pattern, a method. He was careful. Patricia Hammond died on September 18th, sometime before noon. Cause of death would later be determined as strangulation. Rader wrapped her body in plastic sheeting. He didn't bury her immediately. He waited 3 days. Then he dug a grave near the shed's foundation, 5 feet deep. He'd dug similar graves before. The yard was large, overgrown. No one could see from the street, but he made a mistake. Patricia's sister Diana didn't wait. She called the police on September 19th, filed a missing person report, provided Patricia's routine, her work schedule, the grocery store she always used. Diana pushed. She called every day. She posted on social media. She organized searches. And she told investigators about a man Patricia had mentioned, a customer at the store who'd made her uncomfortable. Patricia had described him to Diana 3 weeks before she disappeared. Older man, thin, always buying the same items: duct tape, rope, plastic sheeting. He'd tried to start a conversation with her once, asked where she worked. Patricia had walked away. Diana gave police a description. Investigators pulled security footage from the hardware store. They found him. Dennis Rader. Employee records provided his name and address. On October 12th, detectives interviewed Rader at the hardware store. Routine questions. Did he know Patricia Hammond? Had he seen her recently? Rader said no. He was calm, cooperative. He agreed to let officers search his van. They found nothing. The van had been cleaned, detailed. Not a hair, not a fiber. Rader had been doing this for years. He knew how to cover his tracks. But the cadaver dogs knew something was wrong. On November 2nd, officers brought 3 dogs to Rader's property. All 3 alerted to the backyard, the shed area. The probable cause was enough. The warrant was signed that night. The excavation began the next morning. Rader was arrested at 3:45 p.m. while still at work. Patricia Hammond was found alive in the shed 30 minutes later. The forensic team worked in shifts for 6 days. They excavated the entire backyard systematically, grid by grid, photographing and cataloging every inch of disturbed earth. The remains were badly decomposed. Some reduced to skeletal fragments. Others, more recently buried, showed signs of tissue and clothing. By November 9th, they'd recovered 7 complete or partial sets of remains, all female, ages estimated between 21 and 47. Dental records and DNA would eventually provide identifications. The process would take months. The shed was processed as a primary crime scene. The interior was 12 feet by 10 feet. Windowless, a single door with a padlock. Inside, investigators found a wooden chair bolted to the floor, restraints attached to the chair arms, soundproofing material covering the walls, a portable heater, bottles of water, a bucket, tools, and Patricia Hammond, dehydrated, barely conscious. She'd been restrained in that chair for 46 days. Rader had been keeping her alive, feeding her, giving her water. He came twice a day, morning before work, evening after. She was transported to Harrison Medical Center in critical condition. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple injuries consistent with prolonged restraint and assault. She survived. She would later provide testimony that corroborated every piece of physical evidence. The van was seized from Rader's garage. Despite his cleaning efforts, forensic analysis found trace evidence. Hair samples matching 3 of the victims. Fiber evidence. DNA recovered from cracks in the floor panel. The magnetic signs were found in his basement. DR Plumbing Services. He'd used the same van, the same fake company name, for over a decade. Investigators searched his house. They found a filing cabinet in his bedroom. Inside were folders, 1 for each victim. Photographs, personal items he'd taken, driver's licenses, jewelry, a journal documenting dates, methods, burial locations. He'd kept meticulous records. He'd written about Patricia Hammond, about his plans for her. The entry was dated September 18th, the day after her abduction. Digital forensics analyzed his computer. Search history spanning years. Searches for missing person reports. News coverage of unsolved disappearances. He'd been following the investigations, tracking whether police were getting close. They never had been. Not until Diana Hammond refused to stop pushing. The hardware store provided employment records. Rader had worked there for 14 years. Security footage was reviewed. Investigators identified at least 4 of the victims shopping at the store in the months before they disappeared. He'd been hunting from his workplace, observing women, learning their routines, following them. One victim, later identified as Michelle Torres, 29, had disappeared in 2018. Her family had filed a missing person report. Her car was found near a hiking trail. Police had investigated it as a possible suicide or hiking accident. Her body was in Rader's yard. She'd shopped at the hardware store twice in July 2018. Rader had waited in the parking lot and followed her home. Another victim, identified as Rebecca Chen, 34, had vanished in 2020. Last seen leaving work at a dental office. Her case had gone cold within months. No suspects. No leads. She was buried near the shed's east wall. Rader's journal indicated he'd encountered her at the grocery store, followed her for 3 weeks before taking her. The timeline of murders stretched back to 2012. The earliest victim was identified through dental records as Amanda Price, 27, a teacher who'd disappeared while jogging. Her remains were the deepest, buried under 6 feet of earth. Her case had been listed as a probable abduction. No arrests were ever made. Until now. Each case followed the same pattern. Women alone. Routine schedules. Night shifts or early morning activities. Rader observed them. Followed them. Abducted them in isolated parking lots or quiet streets. Brought them to the shed. Kept them alive for varying periods, days or weeks. Then killed them. Buried them in his yard. Patricia Hammond broke the pattern only because her sister acted immediately. Within 48 hours of her disappearance, Diana had mobilized searches, posted online, contacted news stations, provided detailed information about the man Patricia had mentioned. Most families waited longer. Most missing person cases went cold before anyone looked closely. But Diana didn't wait, and the cadaver dogs found what had been hidden for 11 years. The evidence was overwhelming. Rader's journal, the filing cabinet, the victim's personal items, DNA in the van, 7 bodies in his yard. Patricia Hammond's testimony. There was no defense, no plausible explanation. His attorney understood this within days of his arrest. On November 15, 2023, 12 days after his arrest, Dennis Rader's attorney approached prosecutors with an offer. Rader would plead guilty to all charges. He would provide full information about every victim. Locations of any remains not yet recovered. Details about his methods. Everything. In exchange, he wanted life in prison without parole instead of the death penalty. Prosecutors consulted with the victims' families, Patricia Hammond, the families of the 7 women found in the yard. The decision wasn't unanimous. Some wanted a trial, wanted him to face cross-examination, wanted him to answer for what he'd done in public. Others wanted closure, wanted the details, wanted to avoid the trauma of a lengthy trial. Patricia Hammond made the decision clear. She would testify if needed. But she wanted it over. She wanted him locked away forever. She wanted to begin healing. Her voice carried weight. She was the survivor, the one who'd endured 46 days in that shed, the one who'd come closest to becoming the 8th victim. Prosecutors accepted the deal. On December 8, 2023, Rader appeared in court. He pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 7 counts of kidnapping, multiple counts of unlawful imprisonment and assault. The proceedings lasted 2 hours. Rader spoke only to confirm his guilty pleas. He showed no emotion, no remorse. The victims were named in court: Amanda Price, Michelle Torres, Rebecca Chen, Jennifer Walsh, Christina Morales, Lisa Park, Sarah Kimball. Each family was present. Each had the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements. Some spoke, some couldn't. The grief in that courtroom was suffocating. Patricia Hammond addressed the court. She described the 46 days, the fear, the certainty she would die. the sound of him entering the shed twice daily. She described what he'd said to her, what he'd told her about the others. She looked directly at him while speaking. He never looked back. Sentencing was immediate. 7 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. An additional 60 years for the remaining charges. Dennis Rader would die in prison. The judge made that clear. He would never walk free, never harm another woman, never bury another body in his yard. After sentencing, Rader provided the information he'd promised. There were no other burial sites. All 7 victims had been recovered. He'd worked alone, never had accomplices, never told anyone. He'd maintained the facade of a quiet, unremarkable man for over a decade while maintaining a graveyard in his backyard. The investigation officially closed on January 15, 2024. All 7 victims were identified through DNA and dental records. All families were notified. All remains were released for burial. The house in Port Orchard was seized and later demolished. The lot remains empty. Dennis Rader was 58 years old at the time of his arrest, unmarried, no children. He'd worked in construction for 20 years before taking the job at the hardware store. He had no prior criminal record, no history of violence, no restraining orders, nothing that would have flagged him to authorities. He was arrested at his workplace on November 3, 2023, at 3:45 p.m. Officers approached him while he was stocking shelves in the plumbing section. He didn't resist, didn't ask questions, didn't demand a lawyer. He simply nodded when they read him his rights and walked to the patrol car. During the transport to the Kitsap County Jail, he asked one question. He wanted to know if they'd found Patricia. The officer driving said yes. Rader nodded, said nothing else. The booking process revealed nothing unusual. No tattoos, no distinguishing marks. His fingerprints were entered into the system. His DNA was collected. He was placed in isolation. Standard procedure for high-profile arrests. He requested no phone calls. Declined to contact anyone. His attorney was appointed the following day. The public defender assigned to the case immediately requested a psychiatric evaluation. Rader underwent 3 separate evaluations over 2 weeks. All 3 doctors reached the same conclusion. He was competent to stand trial. He understood the charges. He understood the consequences. He showed no signs of psychosis or diminished capacity. What he showed was calculation, planning, a clear understanding of right and wrong. He'd simply chosen wrong, repeatedly, for 11 years. Background checks revealed a quiet life. He paid his bills. He showed up to work. He kept his yard private. His neighbors barely knew him. The hardware store manager described him as reliable, never late, never caused problems, never gave anyone a reason to look closer. But there were signs, small ones, easily dismissed. He bought the same items repeatedly from his own workplace. Duct tape, rope, plastic sheeting, heavy-duty trash bags. He explained it away, said he did side work, odd jobs, plumbing repairs. No one questioned it. Why would they? He'd been investigated once before. In 2019, a woman reported a white van following her. She'd gotten a partial license plate. The registration came back to Dennis Rader. Officers interviewed him. He explained he'd been driving through the area looking at houses, thinking about moving. The woman couldn't positively identify him as the driver. The investigation closed. He was never charged. That woman was alive because she'd reported it, because police had knocked on his door, because he'd known they were watching. For 6 months after that interview, he didn't hunt. But memory fades. Police moved on to other cases, and Rader started again. On December 8, 2023, he formally entered guilty pleas. The charges were read aloud. 7 counts of first-degree murder, 7 women, 7 lives, 7 families destroyed, 1 count of attempted murder. Patricia Hammond, the woman who survived, the woman whose sister refused to give up. He was remanded to the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Maximum security, solitary confinement. He would spend 23 hours a day in a cell, 1 hour for recreation. No contact with other inmates. No phone calls. No visitors. No possibility of release. Dennis Rader is serving 7 consecutive life sentences plus 60 years at the Washington State Penitentiary. He is 59 years old. He will die in prison. There is no appeal, no possibility of parole, no mechanism for early release. The families of the 7 victims buried their loved ones. Amanda Price's funeral was held in Portland, Oregon in January 2024, 12 years after her disappearance. Her parents had waited over a decade for answers. Michelle Torres was laid to rest in Seattle, Rebecca Chen in Tacoma, Jennifer Walsh in Spokane, Christina Morales in Olympia, Lisa Park in Vancouver, Washington, Sarah Kimball in Bellingham. 7 funerals, 7 families finally able to mourn. Patricia Hammond survived. She spent 6 weeks in the hospital. Physical rehabilitation, psychological counseling. She returned to work as a nurse in March 2024. She testified before the state legislature in support of faster response protocols for missing person cases. Her advocacy led to the Hammond Alert System, a statewide protocol requiring immediate investigation of missing adults when specific risk factors are present. Diana Hammond, Patricia's sister, became a victim advocate. She works with families of missing persons, helps them navigate police departments, teaches them how to push, how to refuse to be ignored. She credits her persistence with saving her sister's life. She's right. The hardware store where Rader worked implemented new employee screening procedures, background checks every 2 years, mandatory reporting of concerning behavior, training for managers on recognizing warning signs. It's something. It's not enough, but it's something. The house in Port Orchard was demolished in February 2024. The lot was excavated to a depth of 10 feet. No additional remains were found. The property was seized by the county. It remains vacant. No one wants to build there. No one wants to live where 7 women were buried. Rader's journal and personal effects were sealed by court order. The families requested they never be made public. The prosecution agreed. The evidence exists in a vault. It will never be displayed. Never be sensationalized. Never give him the attention he documented so carefully. He wanted to be remembered. He kept records because he believed his crimes would eventually be discovered and studied. He thought he was special, unique, worth examining. He was wrong. He's forgotten. The victims are remembered. Patricia Hammond was 41 years old. She was kept in a shed for 46 days. She survived because her sister refused to stop looking.